Moving along to the author's points. Women have disassociated themselves from the scripts or gender roles. However, it is unrelated to the equality wanted in the married lives of high achieving professional women. Study found men actively needing to chase the women, and women do not make the first move because it might hinder a man's masculinity. Exclusivity in the relationship gives men the power to confirm or deny a commitment, avoiding any rejection, leaving women to communicate in an indirect manner, protecting themselves from rejection. Being a breadwinner in a relationship represents having more power in a relationship, but sometimes women want men to be the dominant partner. Commitment is a big factor in a relationship. Therefore, marriage is viewed as the ultimate act of commitment. To conclude, the findings suggest men's participation in unequal courtship patterns are natural and inevitable, more so explaining their own participation as a personal choice that is connected to their personalities and preferences. Meanwhile, women face a similar conflict, yet maintain the same expectations.
So I want to talk about some of the major themes from the reading and how they pertain to the concepts that we studied in the book. So one of the main themes I found in the study that a lot of the conflict surrounded was the idea of commitment, whether it be through being asked out for the first time or asking for exclusivity or asking for marriage even. Starting with being asked out for the first time, we can see that through socialization, they've been conditioned to act a certain way in order to earn the desire of a man, because our society has been socialized to believe that women want commitment and men want to avoid it, that women are supposed to be passive and dependent on men to take the initiative. So we see this in the study, like the women kind of do a dance around wanting to get a man's commitment while also not stepping out of the bounds of what is acceptable for women. The quote the article uses is, women who took that away from men would be considered unappealing partners or desperate, or that women experience men's negative reactions as sanctions for transgressing appropriate gendered behavior. And it's interesting because the study is done on female college students and beyond who are presumably progressive in some regard, and lots of them say their ideal relationship is one with equality and equal dividing of finances and home maintenance. But when it comes to courtship and commitment, they revert back to tradition. And it's even more interesting that when asked why they do, they never own up to the fact that it's because of gender inequality. They say that it's natural for men to behave that way, or I only do because it's what I prefer, or it's just a mere convention. And this is where symbolic interactionism comes into play. If you remember from chapter 2, this is the idea that gender is something we enact or a role that we take on through presentation or interacting with others. And so back to the concept of commitment, women fear that men aren't truly committed, so they rely on traditional scripts to ensure that they are committed. The quote I really like was, women's passivity provided assurance of men's interest and protected them from rejection. So by asking out women, taking them out on a nice date, being chivalrous, paying for the date, the men are showing that they're interested and not just hooking up. And as the relationship goes on, tradition kind of wears away and equality becomes the norm. Paying for dates becomes equal division of labor, or at least the expectation of it. But when it comes again to traditional notions of commitment, and in this case, proposal, they revert back to tradition. The phrase the study uses is backstage work, which is the idea that women actually put in a ton of effort to getting their partner to propose to them, but for everybody outside of their relationship, they act like it was a surprise. They want to keep the illusion that the man is the one who planned everything, because if a woman proposed, they would indicate that because of the often repeated sentiment that proposals initiated by women, whether directly or indirectly, were coercive and indicated a lack of interest by the man, women feel conflicted about issuing ultimatums or otherwise influencing the timing of the engagement. And so while women were willing to play a decisive role in the timing of their marriage proposal, they often preferred to keep the illusion of surprise with their peers. So overall, we see this struggle for women to be progressive and independent because they've seen how their mothers and role models were treated while being dependent on others. So they desire for equality in a relationship, but still instinctually fall into courtship behaviors they've been socialized to follow. Because at the end of the day, even modern courtship is governed by gender norms. So in order to get a partner, they need to take on the necessary scripts. And in order to rectify this juxtaposition and still appear autonomous and independent, they attribute unequal courtship behaviors of men as natural or biological, and their behaviors as just going along with convention or as just one of their preferences.
I hope y'all have learned a lot from everything we've said so far in regards to the discussion regarding egalitarian relationships, as well as women and men's behavior in the modern time of dating and courtship. And so if y'all could get together in around 3 to 4 people per group, and then we can start some discussion questions. So the first question is, how does social class affect a woman's behavior and acceptance of traditional gender norms? The second question is, can you describe dating norms in another culture? Contrast it with Western dating norms or traditional United States dating norms. The third question is, how can a relationship align itself to egalitarian views? And the fourth question is, discuss breaking points of a relationship between you and your potential partner. Do you think they would be the same or different? And if they are different, how do you think you would resolve that conflict within that relationship? One thing that they mentioned in the book is this couple, when they first moved in, they had a really big fight, and one of them wanted to break up with the other, and the girl in the relationship didn't see that the guy was as committed as her, because right after the fight, he went off and did homework, and she kept fuming and stewing in the fight that they had in the living room. So, do you think that, how would you resolve that conflict within your relationship if something like that happened, and how would you try to move on? Do you think that would be a breaking point, or do you think that you would be able to resolve that fight, and then what would you use to then make sure that fight didn't occur in that same capacity later on?
Since today's reading talks about traditional gender norms, I found a video about a progressive couple explaining how they achieve an egalitarian relationship. So throughout the video, they talk about, the husband talks about how, or his opinion on women proposing, and they talk about like who's in charge, gender norms, on dates, for example, how men are perceived to be the one to pay on dates, and why he explains why he decided to propose instead. After the video, I wanted to discuss more questions with the class. For example, with more progressive or people challenging gender norms, how many women in the class would be okay with proposing to men, or to the men in the class, how would they like it if the woman they were dating decided to propose to them? Then I would ask the females in the class if they think males need to pay for their food when they go out on dates, or vice versa. Do males think there's pressure for them to pay on dates,